The present topic of discussion is on cell injury, cell death, and cellular adaptations. It's a third part. So, wherein in our first and second parts we have discussed about cellular adaptations, reversible cell injury and its morphological forms, and irreversible cell injury in the form of cell death, that is necrosis and apoptosis, were discussed. In this topic, in this part, we shall be discussing what all changes will be there after cell death. Okay, that we are gonna discuss now. So firstly we'll talk about changes after cell death. So if we see in irreversible cell injury, the main forms of cell death are necrosis and apoptosis. So after necrosis and apoptosis, what all changes will occur? So it can be observed in the form of two types, that is gangrene as well as pathological calcifications. Mainly they are seen after necrosis. Okay, so if we see gangrene, firstly we'll talk about gangrene. Gangrene, it is a type of necrosis with an superadded putrefaction. Okay, so we will see necrosis and a superadded putrefaction. Putrefaction is nothing but decay. Okay, and this necrosis, what we see in gangrene, is a type of coagulative necrosis. Okay, so like when we are discussing about coagulative necrosis, what did we say is the causative factor? Mainly it is ischemia, that is decreased blood supply. So here even gangrene also, it will be because of the coagulative necrosis following ischemia with superadded putrefaction. And gangrene is of two types, mainly dry gangrene and wet gangrene, and there is a variant of wet gangrene called as gas gangrene. Now let's see about dry gangrene. So dry gangrene, it is also because of ischemia only. Okay, so this ischemia, that is because of lack of blood supply. This lack of blood supply, it can be because of various causes like atherosclerosis, thromboangiitis obliterans, that is Berger's disease, or Raynaud's disease, or any trauma to the area, or it might be result of ergot poisoning. So these are all various causes that can result in ischemia. And the most commonest area where dry gangrene occurs is the distal part of the limb. So here, as it is farthest from the blood supply, so the invading bacteria, okay, they find it really hard to grow. So what they do is like they will start to spread slowly upwards. So till where they will spread to the point of blood supply. So when you see a dry gangrene area, there will be a line of demarcation or a line of separation which will be seen in between gangrenous part and a viable part. Why, you will know later. Okay, so why? Because there is a picture here, that is a gross picture of a dry gangrene. So as you can see in this picture, the affected part is totally dry, it is shrunken and dark black, resembling, how is it? It resembles the foot of a mummy. Okay, so why it is turning into dark black? It is because there will be lysis of red blood cells which will release hemoglobin. So this hemoglobin, it combines with hydrogen sulfide released by the bacteria. So the iron in hemoglobin, it will combine with the hydrogen sulfide of bacteria, resulting in iron sulfide. So this iron sulfide is basically black in color. So because of this liberation of iron sulfide, the whole area will turn into black color. So this is about dry gangrene. Next we will see about wet gangrene. It is contrast to that it is seen in moist tissues or moist areas. Naturally moist areas like bowel, lung, mouth, vulva, cervix. In these areas this wet gangrene will be seen. Usually it develops because of blockage of venous as well as arterial blood supply, which will be a result of thrombosis or embolism. So whenever there is this blockage of venous or blood supply in that area, but the affected part will be stuffed with blood, right? So this affected area stuffed with blood, it acts as a nutritive factor for the putrefactive bacteria. So it results in growth of putrefactive bacteria. So whenever bacterial growth increases, these bacteria, they will start to produce toxins and they will also grow. So this growth of bacteria in the blood results in septicemia. So as septicemia increases, it might even result in death of the person also. Okay, so usually wet gangrene is seen in cases of diabetic foot. So why diabetic foot is because in case of diabetic patients, there will be high glucose content, right? So these glucose content favors the growth of the bacteria. Okay, and then in case of bed sores, here in case of bedridden patients where there will be pressure on sites like all these sacrum, buttocks and heel areas, even wet gangrene will be seen. Next we will talk about gas gangrene. It is a variant of wet gangrene. So here what happens is that uh, through open contaminated wounds there will be this bacteria, that is clostridia, which is a gas forming bacteria. It enters the tissues through the open contaminated wounds. So whenever it enters the tissues, they will start to release toxins. Okay, so this clostridia produce various toxins that results in necrosis of the tissue as well as local tissue edema. So grossly, if you see that affected area, it will be swollen and edematous because of the toxins, and it will also be painful, and crepitus may be heard because of the presence of gas bubbles of carbon dioxide which are produced by the bacteria, that is clostridium. And microscopically, if you see here, as it mainly occurs in the muscle tissue, so the muscle fibers will show coagulative necrosis, and sometimes with liquefaction it will show. So this is about gangrene. So what is the next change which can be seen after cell death? It is pathologic calcification. Calcification is nothing but it is deposition of calcium salts. So normal calcification occurs in hard tissues like bone, enamel and all. But if at all it is occurring in other areas, then it is pathologic calcification. So this pathological calcification is of two types, that is dystrophic calcification and metastatic calcification. So dystrophic calcification, it occurs in dead and degenerated tissues. So here the serum calcium levels of the body will be normal only. Okay, there will be normal serum calcium levels, but it occurs in dead and degenerating tissues. Whereas our metastatic calcification, it is a contrast to dystrophic one. Here it occurs in normal tissues, but here there will be derangement in the calcium metabolism. That means there will be increased serum calcium levels, that is hypercalcemia will be there. Okay, so now let's see pathogenesis of both dystrophic and metastatic calcification. So pathogenesis is nothing, it is calcification. That means something like formation of calcium phosphate crystals. That is something very much similar to the formation of hydroxyapatite in bone, enamel and all. Okay. So how does this calcium phosphate crystals are formed in dystrophic calcification? It forms in two stages, that is initiation and propagation. In the initiation phase, so following cell injury, that is it is occurring in dead and degenerating tissues, right? So cell injury will be there. Whenever cell injury will be there, membrane damage will be there of the cells. Membrane contains phospholipids. So whenever phospholipids are released, they will start to liberate these phosphatase enzymes. What these phosphatase enzymes will do is like they will start to generate increased phosphate ions. Okay, so these phosphate ions released into the blood or into the tissues, they will combine with calcium, resulting in calcium phosphate crystals. So this is about initiation. Now that a single crystal is formed, like that many crystals will form. So they will start to fuse together, resulting in crystallization. So that is called as propagation. Okay, this is how calcium phosphate crystallization or calcification will occur in dystrophic method. Whereas in case of metastatic calcification, here what happens is elevated inorganic phosphate excessive binding of this inorganic phosphate will be with elevated calcium ions, resulting in the formation of calcium phosphate. But here in metastatic calcification, only in few areas calcification will occur. So in which areas it will occur? It occurs in areas showing high acid secretions or in areas where there are rapid changes in the pH. Okay, so this metastatic calcification is reversible when we correct the underlying calcium levels. Okay, so it can be reversed. So now let's see where all our dystrophic calcification can be seen. So I told you it is seen in dead and degenerated tissues, right? So in dead tissues where all it will occur, in degenerated tissues where all it will occur. So calcification in dead tissues, firstly it is seen in, most commonly it is seen in caseous necrosis, that is in tuberculosis. Here what happens? The caseous necrosis will undergo calcification resulting in the formation of Raney's complex. Okay. And like in caseous necrosis, it will even occur in liquefaction necrosis as well as fat necrosis. So liquefaction necrosis in chronic abscesses, whereas fat necrosis in acute pancreatitis cases, we'll see calcification. Next is gamma Gandhi bodies, which are nothing but calcified bodies seen in case of chronic venous congestion. Next is in case of infarcts in the body or any thrombi within the body may turn into calcifications in due course of time. And even hematomas which are seen in vicinity of bones also may undergo calcification, and dead parasites like hydatid cyst, schistosoma, cysticercosis, they all might show dystrophic calcification. And congenital toxoplasmosis, which involves central nervous system, may show calcification in the brain. Okay, so this is about dead tissues. Next we shall see about degenerated tissues which show calcification. So in case of dense old scars, so these scars can turn into calcification. Atheromas in aorta, they can turn into calcification. And this arteries, that is tunica media of arteries, may show calcification, that is called as Monckeberg sclerosis. Sometimes tumors, the stroma in tumors also may show calcification, and long standing cysts like our odontogenic cysts also, they may show calcifications. And in cases like calcinosis, cutis and senile degenerative changes, these all might show dystrophic calcification. So this is about dystrophic calcification. Now let's see metastatic calcification, where all it will occur. As we have already discussed, metastatic calcification, it occurs in normal tissues, but here the problem is only hypercalcemia. So how is the blood serum level increases? Either it can be because of the mobilization of the calcium from the bone, or it can be increased absorption of calcium from the gut. So in what all cases there will be excessive mobilization of calcium from the bone? So in case of hyperparathyroidism cases, where there will be movement of calcium from the bone, and in bony destructive lesions, that is in aggressive cancers like multiple myeloma, metastatic carcinoma and all, there will be movement of calcium from the bone. And even in case of paraneoplastic syndromes, where it shows hypercalcemia. And sometimes if we see disuse atrophy of bones, that is if there is prolonged immobilization, then there will be disuse atrophy of the bone resulting in mobilization of the calcium from the bone. So this is about the first part. Then next is excessive absorption of the calcium from the gut. In what cases this absorption of calcium from the gut can be seen? So in the gut, that is in the intestine, there is more calcium that it is absorbed, reabsorbed into the body. So that happens in case of hypervitaminosis D, where there is excessive intake, or in case of sarcoidosis. And next is milk alkali syndrome, where there is excessive oral intake of calcium in the form of milk. Okay, even there will be excessive absorption of calcium from the gut. Next, in case of Williams syndrome, that is idiopathic hypercalcemia of infancy, as well as renal causes, something like in case of renal tubular acidosis also, we might see excessive absorption of calcium from the gut. So basically there are different sites for this metastatic calcification, like in case of kidneys, in alveolar walls of lungs, and in acid secreting glands of stomach, and these lumens of blood vessel, they all might show increased sites of metastatic calcification. So this marks the end of our cell injury, wherein in this third part we have discussed about changes of the cell death, that is about gangrene as well as calcification. So if we see, like, both are important in exam perspective, that is they might come as essays or they might come as short notes. And on the whole, this whole chapter, that is cell injury, cell death as well as cellular adaptations, each and every part of it, that is reversible and irreversible injury in the form of necrosis, apoptosis, Okay, cellular adaptations, all the forms of cellular adaptations. Okay, everything is important.